Welcome to Yelling into the Void, a podcast discussing and exploring topics in World of Warcraft. I'm Tevin. I'm here with Scott as always. And last week it was dragons. This week it's bugs. And I mean, not spider bugs, but like bugs in the code bugs. But also dinosaurs. So I don't know what we're doing here, Scott, but they are going all out on the animals and other wildlife here recently.
Yeah, I think they're just running down the list of my son's favorite things and just throwing it all in the game, which is good for me. It's good for me.
Well, if you haven't heard, if you haven't listened to the podcast last week, the 20th anniversary patch has happened, and that brought with it pretty much everything we covered last week, which is a whole podcast worth of things to go over. So I recommend you go listen to last week if you haven't done that already. Other than that, it also brought a lot of unforeseen things in, which I don't know. I want to start this off about kind of covering how this week we're going to be looking on how we can improve kind of what happened with the patch last week. The subsequent hot fixes that happened. I want to be very clear. This isn't intended to be ragging on the devs. This isn't intended to be hating on the game just in general on itself. But I do think it's important to be a little bit introspective on what's happening here and kind of the current state of what the cadence of this game is.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to elaborate on that, Scott?
I mean, this has been the buggiest patch that's come out since I rejoined the game a few years ago. So it's not in a great state. And I mean, it feels like, so I think there's a couple things happening here. First of all, when we saw the patch notes, when we saw the dev notes for this patch like a month and a half ago, like 2 weeks after War Within had come out, it became very clear to us at that time that like everything class balancing wise that was going into the game in this patch, or was going to be going to the game in this patch, was stuff that they wanted to do for the War Within and just didn't get around to doing it. They just ran out of time. And so I think there was an expectation going into this patch that at least from like a class balancing perspective, from a class like restructuring and reorganization, and that things were going to be pretty good, because this was just stuff that wasn't quite ready for release, but then they had an extra 6 weeks to work on it and it'd be good. That was not what happened. It is very clear to me, and we will never know the true story behind all this, but it's very clear to me that they were not ready to release this patch, but they set a date for it, and so they had to do it anyway. And it's been quite the clusterfuck across the board. I think the most the most unforgivable part of this is the class balancing and the bugs present in many classes, and the amount of time it's taken to get those things situated and worked out, and the nerfs and buffs and then undos and then redos, and it's just quite a mess. It's quite a mess. And yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this going into the release of the War Within, where we're like, is this expansion ready? And now we're moving into the first, I guess not the first major content patch, but a fairly large content patch. And once again, bugs everywhere. I think we saw a similar thing in Season 4 of Dragonflight, that up until that point, I think the game bug-wise was pretty good. But from that point on, it's been like nothing seems quite ready. And that's concerning for sure.
Yeah, so to cover some of the main things that happened here, there were an absolute ton of bugs happening while people were leveling, like getting procs for things that they didn't even have access to, getting procs for things that they couldn't even cast. Like we had somebody who got a proc for Ice Lance on an arcade stage who had access to Ice Lance, and it just sat on their screen forever. They're like minor for what happened this patch. Like, if we're being completely honest with ourselves, like the most atrocious thing that happened this patch is by far what happened with Outlaw Rogue. And that you could switch to their I forget what the hero talent's called for Outlaw, but not the coin one, the other one. And you could get to the point where like you would proc your additional damage on your finishers, like them being treated like they were using more combo points. You would use that on a critter, which would maintain the buff for you indefinitely after you swapped back to the other hero talent. So like people were just like completely breaking the game with this. It has since been patched. I believe that the log or the runs that people did for Mythic Plus on this have been removed at least from Raider IO. I'm not sure inside the game how that's being handled,
I believe they've
but
been rolled back because I think they rolled back some mythic kills as well. Like they were stacking outlaw rogues using this bug to kill some bosses as well.
okay.
And I think they rolled those kills back. So they're doing stuff, and I think, I mean, that's the kind of thing where like it requires so much setup that it's very very obvious that you are aware of this and are exploiting it. Like there's some bugs where you could maybe argue, like the one we talked about where you were like web pulling bosses, or there was a weird one with Silken Court where if you like, for some reason, if you happen to have the boss like pixel perfectly stacked in the middle of the room, which is the place that they run to before burrowing and starting the intermission phase, well, if you happen to have it perfectly stacked there, it would just not know what to do, and so it would just stand there and do nothing. It would just not cast any more abilities for the rest of the fight, and like that's the type of thing where you can like accidentally do that, right? Like, yes, you could intentionally do that, but also it's very believable that you could just have the boss there and not realize this and not know what's going to happen. But yeah, this is like foresight planning, very very obvious that you're abusing this thing. So I think there should be consequences of some sort for this.
Yeah, I agree. So the other main things that kind of like were wrong with this, I guess, and I don't even know like I don't even know if you'd call this wrong, Scott, but like they did the shaman overhaul, right?
Yeah.
And people knew that Ellie was going to be insane off of the PTR, and they came in, they released it as it was. It was obviously insane, and then they did like hot fixes throughout the week, and now they have released patch notes for what they were going to do to Ellie, but they weren't clear on whether this was going to also include another hot fix that they were talking about. And now that they've completely thrown all of that out the window and everything looks like it's good again, I don't really know what's going on here. And like I know that Blizzard is kind of notorious for not being the most clear in their patch notes, but like this is pretty significant nerfs that they're doing to Ellie, and this is something that needs to be right so that people can start planning and looking into what the impact of this is going to be on their class. Because we're talking like Shaman as a whole is one of the most played classes right now, meta wise, for the expansion.
Sure.
And so people are swapping to Ellie, changing their gear, doing all of this stuff. We talked about it last week where like mastery overnight became the best stat for elemental. And like things like this just shake everything up. And with the price of getting crafted shit done this expansion, like this is a big deal. And I think that they need to work on their messaging around this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been seeing a lot of changes that have not been making it to patch notes or hot fixes. Like, there's things that have been adjusted or changed that I think Wowhead reports them as undocumented. And like, it's the point where like, were you trying to sneak it in, or did you just like forget to communicate it and it didn't get sent up the chain? And the person who writes these blue posts just didn't realize they were supposed to put it in. Like, there is a lot of sloppiness here, right? I mean, that's like it's one thing. Like, look, I am not a developer. I do not know the ins and outs and the details of the code of this game and but I know enough to know like it's really easy to break shit and not know how you broke it, and like it takes time and effort to figure out where it's broken and why and what random thing is doing some random thing. I get this a lot, but there's a lot of sloppiness in this. Like when they pushed the PTR build to live, it just didn't include the hot fixes that had been put into live in the weeks prior, because they shut down the patch test realm like 2 weeks before live, and then they pushed several hot fixes to the live edition of the game, and then when they pushed the test build forward, it didn't have those hot fixes in it. So it's like that's just 101 coding shit. Like that's just like that, like that's version control. That's like the basics. That's like inexcusable mistakes that a professional company as big as Blizzard should not make. And it feels like it's a lot of that, like just a lot of these weird things that things are breaking weirdly. They're not getting fixed. It wasn't ready. Like, bottom line, it just wasn't ready. And I know this company is like pretty infamous for like having to delay and just being like, we are not going to ship something until it's ready. And they've like notoriously went away from that in the past. I think the main thing you probably wanted to talk about here is they've developed this very, very aggressive release cadence. Like, it's something that worked very well for them in Dragonflight. It got people's attention. People liked it because like, oh, there's always something new coming out and it's always here and awesome and it's quick. And I mean, it just doesn't seem like they have the resources to keep up with it. It feels like what it feels like is if you look at the last two expansions on like a chart, like they were ahead of the game going into Dragonflight, and they've just been slowly falling further and further behind, and it caught up with them in season 4 of Dragonflight. You remember all the weird bugs with crests in season 4 where just like it's just totally broken shit? And then like that's just carried forward into this, where they're now like, maybe we release a patch 2 days before it was ready. Well, this patch feels like it was released 2 weeks before it was ready, and it feels like it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. So it's like, I don't know what the correct solution here is like, just to be honest with yourselves and with the people that, hey, maybe we can't maintain this kind of schedule. People aren't going to like that either, but this looks bad. Like, everything that's happened over the past week looks really bad. And I'll say, I don't think any of the classes that I'm playing or any of the things that I'm doing have really been affected by this personally at all. So I'm kind of just straight chilling, but I am like watching what this is doing to people. And I agree with you. Like, it is very frustrating to have the class that you play just change so frequently that you can't keep up with it. And I think there's a happy medium between what they used to do, which is that they wouldn't do any class balancing shit until a patch cycle, right? They just like, oh, that class is broken. Well, it's going to be that way for 3 months. Oh, that class is unplayable. Well, it's going to be that way for 3 months. That doesn't feel good. But also the frustration of everything's changing every other day and I can't keep up with it, I think is not a great look either. So I don't know. I'll let you talk. I've been talking for a while. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I think fixing the bugs is fine. Like, if they're doing that overnight and all the time.
Oh
like,
yeah. Bug fix, do right away. Yeah.
But like, yeah, I mean, the things that they're doing with Elemental are not bug fixes. Like, they knew that this was the case.
Well, there was a bug with Elemental.
Well, yeah.
And that, I mean, and part of like the data they're getting are they aware that half of the data is because of bugs, right? Because like that's the thing I heard our Elemental Shaman friend complaining about, is that they're simultaneously fixing a bug that is making the class overpowered and nerfing the class at the same time, which compounds into a massive nerf. Now, thankfully, they walked back the first half of that, right? But they still announced it. They still said, it's like, and it makes you think, do they realize what's happening here?
Yeah. I don't want to get too much more deep into the weeds on this, because we do have kind of like a section on this. But
are we not in the section yet? I thought we were there.
No. I wanted to at least explain to people that there was like classic stuff going on and stuff like that happening.
No. Nobody cares about that.
But so we'll come back to this, because like the bugs are like, unfortunately, between a week from today, a week ago today, and today, what else is there really for us to talk about? Like, the bugs have really been the star of the show for this patch. And to me, that is just kind of sad.
Yeah.
It is a bad look for the game. It's sad for everybody who's playing it. It's sad for the developers having to deal with this. But it is the mainstay that's happened in this last week. And there definitely needs to be something that we need to do to like either talk about this or reflect on it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I do want to do that here in just a second. So to finish up kind of like the new stuff, we did get what do you call this? I'm going to call it a nerf to an affix, which is ultimately going to be a buff for us.
Yeah.
So there was a change to the minus 15 second death affix. I think what's that called, like Challenger's Guile or something like that.
I don't even know,
Um,
man. Challenger's Peril, I think it's called.
Challenger's Peril. Yeah. That's it. Anyways, it's the thing that comes on at 7s that makes you lose 15 seconds on death rather than 5 seconds. They essentially, every keystone level from 7 onwards has 90 additional seconds added to the timer, which, like, whatever. We'll get into this in a second too. It's a solution, I guess. And then the Firelands patch for Classic was released today. Scott and I are still kind of got Classic on hold for now. That's not to say we won't ever go back to it, but that released today, which means the raid will release next Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
There'll probably be another call out in our news section next Thursday about this, or next Tuesday, sorry, about this. Wednesday is when you'll be hearing it. So yeah, that's all the main news stuff. And so now let's circle back to what we were talking about with the bugs.
Okay, bugs.
Okay, so I don't want to be like just overly drowning out kind of what we've been talking about, but like the bug with rogues should have never been there.
Yeah.
To begin with.
Yeah.
Like, this is a question that I've been asking myself ever since Blizzard did this huge layoff a few years ago on, like, is it really right for us to be in a world where the primary testing for your game is done by people who pay to play your game rather than people who are paid to play your game?
Yeah. And I mean, the biggest problem, like, I think that strategy kind of sort of works for beta a little bit, because I think people are pretty heavily invested in getting into the beta and testing things, because it's all new stuff. It's new dungeons. It's new, like, a lot of testing of beta goes on. I just don't think people test, like, players test on the PTR very much. I mean, there are some people that do it. I don't think there's clearly not enough. And especially for this, like, we talked about how this patch went up on the PTR like the week that the season of the War Within started. And so, like, this especially, people aren't going to test it because they got stuff they're doing. They're playing the game. The raid just came out. Mythic Plus just started. Like, it's a whole new expansion of stuff to do. And then you're going to drop this patch on the PTR. And then they took it down 2 weeks early, which I'm still not sure exactly why they did it. Maybe that's standard. I don't really pay attention to the life cycle of the patch test realm, but they need additional testing. And yeah, they've been relying on us crazies for a long time, and I just don't think they can reliably do that anymore, and arguably never could. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Stuff like this is just inexcusable. Testing obviously would have exposed this stuff. I mean, the fact that people on live noticed these bugs immediately, like, I saw a tweet from Ellismere this morning that was like, on Holy Paladin, they made a nerf to the Blessed Assurance talent, but the nerf was only supposed to be for PvP only, and someone forgot to turn that flag on, so it was nerfing it in PvE as well. They fixed it later today, but these are like things that, like, someone's got to discover the shit before it goes live. And look, I think we're not saying that there can never be bugs in the game, because, like, I don't think anyone has that expectation, right? It's like,
Right.
Shit breaks, stuff goes wrong. This is the nature of video games and of development. You're never going to have a 100% bug-free game. It's fine. But this is beyond all of that. This is excessive. This is insane. And this is, like we talked about, like, just sloppiness. It's just sloppiness in, I don't know, in their version control process and their in everything. I don't know.
Yeah, the main thing that sticks with me is the fact that people in the live version of the game who are not playing the game with the intention of breaking the game are finding things that are broken.
Yeah.
And so when you have people who are playing the game with the intention to break things, I feel like these things could come to light more. Blizzard used to have a QA staff that would, test all of this stuff beforehand. There used to be, game masters and everything like that. And if we are going to a cadence at which we are pushing out content like a fire hose, I think that it's time to revisit potentially bringing some of those people back online, because like it's just not feasible for the low amount of testing effort that's being put into these patches that are coming out
Yeah.
for the rate at which they are coming out.
Yeah, and I believe they got rid of their internal QA, and I believe they outsourced it, right? I don't actually
Yeah.
know who they outsourced it to, or and obviously we don't know any of the details of that arrangement and what's going on and how much time they're given and how much they're paid and yada yada yada. So we're not going to speculate on any of that stuff. But I mean, I think it's fair to look at this and say that is a process and a business decision that's not working out. And so something has to give, something has to change, whether it's giving people more time, it's getting a bigger staff, it's, yeah, like you said, firing your third party and bringing that stuff in house again. Something's got to give here, because I agree. This is, it's embarrassing. It just doesn't look good. And this, again, I think one of the things I want to stress here is like, this game was fucking killing it coming into this expansion, right? Like people were loving the War Within. Like the story was so good. The game was so solid. And look, WoW players are always going to complain about something. Like that's what we do. But I do think this rises above the level of like petty complaining about class balance or people saying they're not designing the game enough for me specifically. Like this is the kind of stuff that just like in 2024 with a game that's 20 years old, you just can't tolerate anymore.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so like the other thing that happened over this past week is and it's hard because like part of me wants to just be like, this is like absolutely insane that this happened. But also the other part of me is like, well, this was probably already scheduled and it happened anyways. But they released a $90 in-store amount after all of these bugs have happened. And so it's just like, I forget what the meme was, but it was like something along the lines of like, you get a buggy game and I get $90. And so like, I don't know, it feels very scummy and very cash grabby on the timeline at which they released this. I think a $90 in-store mount is already kind of cash grabby when they already kind of had this able to be bought with real life money anyways. It was just like $500 then. So
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think everyone was like in the waiting through the bugs, and then we saw like the impact tremors like from Jurassic Park, and it was a giant dinosaur riding up on the land. So I think there's two conversations to have here. The one conversation is about a $90 auction house mailbox mount in general and whether that's a good, healthy thing for the game. And the other conversation is about the timing of this, which you're absolutely right, looks bad. I think with the timing stuff, like it's hard for me personally to get too bent out of shape about this, because this is like two entirely different teams working on things, right? Like it's not like anyone was saying, "Oh, well, I could fix this bug or I could work on the Brutosaur." Like that's not how any of this stuff works. Now, from a high level, it is like a division of labor thing, you know, like at the upper levels of management is like how are we setting aside our budgets and our resources towards what thing. Like, yeah, I think that's a valid complaint to make. But yeah, like so much of this is siloed and like pre-planned, right? Like all this stuff is supposed to center around the 20th anniversary. So they had a pretty set time because this is the 20th anniversary. And so they had all these different teams working on all these different things to celebrate that 20th anniversary. One of those celebrations was this very, very expensive mount. So it's not as if they like said, "Oh, it'll be fine. We can release a buggy patch because we're going to make our money off of lost subs by all these people buying this mount." Like probably nobody said that in a meeting. It was always planned to be this way. So yeah, you are correct though. The bottom line is it looks very, very bad to release a patch in a state this buggy and then days later say, "But if you want to spend more money, here's a piece of candy. You want a piece of candy? I got a $90 piece of candy right here. You want to buy it?" Yeah, that doesn't look good.
Yeah. I mean, so look, I work in a corporate job for my day job, so I get deadlines are just going to happen,
Yeah.
right? Like this is just something, but I do feel like whoever the PR rep that had to deal with the backlash of this is just like sitting there like, why are they doing this to me? This is so bad.
Maybe we should delay the dinosaur.
So yeah, I, let's talk about the dinosaur mount though. So before this was just a mount you could buy, this was released in BFA,
Mm-hmm.
the original Brutosaur mount, the original long boy, if you will, was released in BFA for 5 million gold. It was essentially there to be a gold sink because people had amassed gold anywhere from Warlords of Draenor onwards, even Pandaria onwards. Like gold making was super easy in those expansions. And so people just had mountains and mountains and mountains of gold. And so they're trying to dump some of this off. But the WoW token also exists. So theoretically, you could have bought the Brutosaur at that current time for something like $475. So now we have a $475 mount that has been downgraded to a $90 mount a few years later and placed in the BNet store for you to just purchase outright rather than having to buy tokens over and over and over and over again. By the way, that mount is significantly more expensive now because now it costs gold cap because it's no longer in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to buy it through the black market auction house, which means it's always going to be bid on for gold cap. So it's a very interesting time where we live. And I think that in general, a $90 mount is a bit much for me. And that's saying something for somebody who spends money on literally anything this game releases. But yeah, it seems like a lot.
Yeah, I saw the post about this mount and said, that's amazing. I will buy one immediately. And then I saw the price tag and said, never mind. I will not be spending $90 on a mount. Sure is convenient. This is actually better than the existing one because it has a mailbox instead of just a repair guy. So it is an auction house mailbox in one. It's pretty good. I'm going to be honest with you. I just can't care about this too much. Am I going to buy it? No, it's too expensive for me. I bought mounts in the shop before. Yes, I have. I bought the bear that they released not too long ago that had the transmog and the repair guy on it because I didn't have the transmog yak. I just never bought it. And so I was like, oh, $20. Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and do it. And so I did. I am not against like the existence of the shop, like on a moral level. I don't care that much. I really don't participate in it very much. I think that one mount is like the only one I've ever bought. I don't think I bought anything else outside of buying WoW tokens, which I do support the existence of because the last thing I want to do nor have time to do in this game is to farm shit for gold. So here's the point that I think I would care about this existing is if you start seeing decisions in the game designed around it. For example, in Dragonflight and in The War Within, they have put an auction house in the main city of the expansion. This was not a thing they always did. In Shadowlands, auction house was not in Oribos. You had to go to Stormwind or Augermar. I'm guessing the same thing for a lot of the previous expansions because this is something they've typically always done. Is in the new hub of the expansion. There's bank, there's everything you need except for the auction house because for some reason they just had it in their head that like it's good for the game if you have to go back to the other main cities. It makes the game world seem more alive, I guess, for the lower level players or something. I don't know. They've always had this stance. They reversed the stance in Dragonflight. I think it was a good decision. And if going forward now, suddenly after the existence of this mount, suddenly they go, hey, we've been thinking about it and we don't actually think the new expansion hub should have an auction house in it, then I'm gonna go, you're trying to incentivize people to buy this thing. That's the point where I start to go, okay, I don't like where this is going. But as it stands right now, I don't really care about this. I don't. What do you think?
So I'm right there with you. The other thing that I did want to say though, and I don't know if you have read this or not, but I believe that the $90 Brutosaur is only going to be available until January 6th, 2025.
Ah, yes, a great way to honor and remember January 6th by taking the
So
no. Yeah, I think you're correct that it's a temporary thing. Which is another just a marketing ploy, right? Like temporary breeds scarcity, breeds gotta have it, gotta get it now. Like, but
that's what I was going to say.
I'm not gonna get too bent out of shape of that though, because that's like every company on the face of the earth uses that marketing method. Like always, it's just what people do. So I'm not going to get too bent out of shape about that. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. That does change things a little bit because presumably this door will close, and then and so there shouldn't be motivation in the design going forward to design around pressuring people to drop money on stuff like this.
Yeah, so that's the only reason that I kind of have a problem with this is if they do exactly what you were saying and go back on their idea on having an auction house in the major cities, and now you can't get this mount again. And so now it's just going to be forcing people to buy WoW tokens to get the other Brutosaur mount that costs 10 million gold is,
Yeah.
that's a bit weird to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I will also say that like the main city not having an auction house is an annoyance, but it's not that big of like it's not that big of a deal to fly to the Stormwind portal. Like it's stupid. I shouldn't have to do that, but like it's not. I'm gonna spend thousands of dollars in WoW tokens. Annoying, like, and I mean for me it's not even. I would spend $90 on this mount. Annoying. But that's I mean that's a personal choice that every person has to make. Obviously, like this thing is hugely successful. You go to the city and see how many of them are just walking around, which is hilarious because they're all standing there mere feet from the auction house and the mailbox next to it. But it's obviously people are buying it like crazy. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's why they do these things because people buy them. What was the thing about that? I think their first cash shop mount like made more money than all of StarCraft 2.
Yeah.
Like that's just like these people buy this stuff and it works, so they keep doing it.
Well, I'm not going to go out and say that I'm never going to buy it because you know me, I flip flop on my decisions all the time.
Uh huh.
So, but as it currently stands, I'm going strong and I haven't bought it yet. So, no intention to buy it currently.
I mean, we probably have some listeners that buy it, and like, look, everyone has to make their own choice about this kind of thing. I made it pretty clear that this is not for me. I'm not really interested in dropping that much money for something like this. But like everyone plays differently and wants different things. And there's people out there that like will not buy WoW tokens, and that's fine. I do. So yeah, I mean, like I'm definitely not going to judge anyone who
Correct.
decided to pull the trigger on this. I get it. I totally get it. And you get like life's short. If you got the money, use it on stuff that brings you joy. That's what I say. So go for it. Buy your mount.
The other part of this is I don't know if I need to buy it because we've got at least a few people in our guild who have bought it. So I'll just go do stuff with them and then.
Yeah, I mean that's true. Like if you're in a raid and any person in your raid has it, nobody else needs it. If you're in a 5-man group, if one person in your 5-man has it, you're set. Like definitely don't need everyone to have this thing. So I fully plan to leech off of other people on this. So maybe we'll do like a timeshare, like a Brutosaur timeshare.
Yeah, you get them out this week. I get it next week. So the only other thing that I had in this section is kind of what we were talking about earlier. So I don't know how much more we really have to go on about this, but it is essentially what's going on with shamans. And the reason I separated this from the bugs and everything else is because, like I said, what happened with shamans isn't necessarily because of the bug that shamans had. I think there were a couple of bugs with shamans. The one that's coming to me off the top of my head is when they pressed ascendance, it would like flame shock in single target. It would flame shock the single mob like 6 times, which would then overload and could proc everything else. So that was an issue, obviously. But yeah, I mean, everything with shamans isn't like it's hard because I don't think that this is bug related. I think this is literally like they made these changes, they made the class better, everything was looking good, and they just missed the mark with the numbers, and they were too late to change it. And now you've got people who have switched to this class who are now switching off of it. And like, I get it. Flavor of the month rerollers, people tend to dog on them a lot all the time, but it happens. It's gonna happen in this game.
Yeah.
And it's annoying to plan to do something and then just have your plan shattered when ultimately that thing just changes fundamentally before you can even achieve like the item level or the I don't know, IO or something that you wanted to on it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's totally true. And I feel bad for anyone that like switched to Shaman expecting it to be far and away the best DPS, where now it's just pretty good. I think we're too fucking meta driven in this game though. Like I really do. I think like out of any video game I've seen in the last 10 years, like this is the one that is so concerned about just like percentile point differences between things. And I think it's like ruining us a little bit. And I'm using
Yep.
us here because I am absolutely part of the problem. Um, and so like, and it's like, I think Blizzard has fostered that kind of relationship with the game. Like, I don't know whether it's like, it's this a chicken and egg situation, right? Like, did this develop on its own and then Blizzard fostered it, or did it develop because Blizzard fostered it? I don't know. But ultimately, like, we are just so obsessed with meta and the best and the margins of goodness between specs and classes and things, and are willing to hop and jump for anything because people want to be the best, right? Like people want, like, it's a data driven game and people want to know that they're playing a thing that is not going to underperform just because it's not as balanced. Like, I think people understand and have a little bit more patience for underperforming because I lack as much skill as the other person, because that's something you can fix over time. Hopefully you can get better. But yeah, just like the feeling of, well, I'm not doing as much damage as this guy because he's overpowered right now and they're not doing anything about it, or and then they nerfed me, and like I that's incredibly frustrating, and I get it, but I think we need to calm down a little bit here.
Yeah.
Just we all need to collectively be like, how much does this actually matter? Like, can we just try to play what's the most fun? And like this, is it the prisoner's dilemma or something, where like if everyone just picked to be unselfish, then everyone wins, but
Mhm.
one person is always going to be like, well, they're probably going to be selfish, so I am, and then so everyone loses. And that's
Yeah.
essentially what we have going on here. It's like, because I can hear the argument to what I'm saying right now is like, well, I have to play the meta because then nobody will invite me to a group. And it's like, yeah, I get that, but like if we all just collectively decided to stop it, then everything would be better off. But well, that will never happen because that's how people work.
Yeah, the other thing with shamans that is interesting to me is they have been so strong throughout this entire expansion.
Yeah.
And even with these nerfs, they are still very strong. Like they are still going to be top
Both
or
specs,
middle
right?
top of the pack. Yeah, yeah. And I don't know, enhancement's in a little bit more of a weird state. I feel like people who are playing enhancement don't like it. So
Interesting.
yeah, at least for the feedback that I've been hearing, but people were like in love with how Ellie was feeling.
Mhm.
Um,
I have a bone to pick with elemental shamans. Stop it with your freaking earthquakes on the ground that
I was
make it
about
so
to,
I can't see anything.
I was about to segue into this. So I want to know, do you feel like we need a setting like you can have in Final Fantasy where you can turn off like allies' abilities?
Yes, I do. Um, it did get me killed once. It was Grimbatol, and right before the final boss, those guys that drop the swirlies, and I saw one under my feet. I moved into the mobs, and there were earthquakes fucking everywhere, and I thought I was not in one, but I was in one, and so I got mind controlled, and then everything went to shit. And like, that's my fault. Like, I'm not saying, oh, that's the showman's fault. No, it's my fault. But I think with stuff like that, it like covers so much of the ground, and it feels like I'm pretty sure the settings are that like the swirlies and stuff are supposed to be on top of it, but like it they're slightly transparent, and so the colors change. It's very difficult to see at times, I think. And
Hmm.
so yeah, I feel like I understand you want to have flavor, and like part of the fun of playing a class sometimes is not just that you're doing something, but that like other people are seeing you're doing it. But they do like they already have settings in the game where stuff you see a certain class sees on the ground, other people won't. Like Jade Fire Stomp, right? Like the monk hits it, everyone sees it at first, but then it fades away, and the monk's the only one that can see it from then on out. It feels like maybe this these earthquakes should be something like that or something. But on the other hand, like it's tough because you want to communicate to your team, keep the things in that, right?
Yeah.
Like you I don't know what the correct move on this thing is, but it's a little much, these earthquakes. It's a little much.
Yeah, I would say that it would be cool if anybody who wasn't the shaman only could see like at most like one, like the most recent one placed
Yeah,
or something like
sure.
that. Um, I think that that'd be a good change. The problem is, so like this brings a whole nother issue into like clarity of things that are displayed on the screen to you in this game. And that is like you don't really have a lot of agency to know what is being displayed to you as far as like information the game is trying to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have all of the control over your UI because of add-ons, but you have essentially no control over like the visibility of things outside of like colorblind settings
True.
or
Yeah.
something like that. And it begs a question to where like in I think Elder Scrolls Online does this to where you can specifically pick the colors at which like boss indicators or mob indicators are. So like you could turn all swirlies bright pink if you wanted to. I think that that would be a cool setting. I
Yeah.
think that it'd be hard because they use different skins on pretty much every swirly in the entire game, but I do think that that'd be a cool setting to do.
I think it's doable, and I think it's worth doing because I agree with you. I mean, just like outside of just like your and my complaints, just like an accessibility issue for people with different eyesight, different disabilities, like all these kind of things. The game has done a fairly good job at slowly becoming more accessible for more people, and I think that's good. But this is one of those last areas where I think it could really use some help,
Mhm.
and match up to what a lot of modern games are doing these days. I agree with you. I think you should have more control over that. I think they're like really into the aesthetic and the theming of stuff, and that's why they want stuff to look. They designed it a certain way, and they want it to look this way. They want, if it's a void area, they want void looking swirlies. If it's a fire area, they want like, I get it, and I think that's good. But I also think you can have the base setting, and then you can allow players to ultimately do whatever they want with it. Um,
Yeah.
there would have to be a way, because I'm already thinking of like if this interacts with anything an add-on can do, then you can get like real bad with it, right? Like you can
Yeah.
like be changing settings on the fly. Like there's a lot of really degen shit a person could get up to if you turn on this feature. So they would have to find a way to lock it down, I think, to where you really can't, like a weak aura can't like just be turning this stuff
There's
like
three
crazy.
soaks. They turn each one different colors for people to go stack in the right one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but I think that's a problem that you can solve, and I think they should look into that. I also think like obviously there are different ways that you can change the effects that are happening on screen, right? Like the graphics slider will change what certain effects look like and which certain effects are displayed. The problem I have with that is it's not very obvious. Like there's no clear setting in that. It's just like you're moving a slider back and forth, and you have
Mhm.
no way of knowing like what's going to show up differently or not based on which slider. Like speaking about the last boss in Throne of Tides, how everyone just had a weak aura that would lower, I forget what it was, but it was like particle density or something, that you would go
Yep.
into that last boss and automatically lower that because it made it a lot easier to see the area around the boss. um that's the type of stuff where that should just be built into the game. Like you shouldn't need a weak aura to be lowering graphical settings. It should just be like exactly what you're talking about. So yeah, I know. I think that's worth looking into for sure.
I do think that with this is going to come a lot of other like memey things that come with it. So yeah, the thing is like you want it to be thematic, and that's fine, but you're using a standard color palette, which means your colors are going to overlap it sometimes,
Yep.
that's the danger, right? Like
Yeah.
you're going to have a red swirly on red floor at some point, and that's going to be a problem.
Yep. Yep.
So that's just the thing to be mindful of here, I think.
I will say, to give them credit, I think they've been doing a lot better at telegraphing lately.
Oh, for sure.
They've been really getting better with it, and so I think it's a process, it's a journey, and they need to continue to iterate on that. And I hope they will.
The one thing that I will say that I want them to do, like full stop, is stop having these fucking swirlies with no border.
Yeah.
Every fucking thing that a boss puts on the ground should have a defined fucking border.
I totally agree. Point. It's really fun on the last boss of Arakara, where you've gone into one of the black pools to root you. The boss is doing their cosmic singularity thing, and you're like, am I far enough away from it or not? We'll see if I die. I don't know. Yeah, that shouldn't happen. Like and that's the frustrating part, is like they have designed swirlies with borders on them, right? It's just they're not using them consistently. I mean, this is the thing. Like every one of these things we're talking about has a solution that's in the game right now. They're just not putting them consistently in the game. Like it feels like every Mythic Plus season we start with all these frontals not having this new awesome frontal indicator they've added to the game, and then they have to like, oops, oh yeah, and slowly add those in. And it's just like, no, like every frontal should look like this, every swirly should look like this, every stack mechanic should look like this. Like this is what Final Fantasy 14 does. And yes, like the indicators in Final Fantasy 14 for the most part look completely out of place and do not align with the aesthetic of the actual fight you're doing, with exceptions. There are some that align very well with the aesthetic, but like a lot of the most standard ones, the stack mechanic, the split mechanic, like these are universal things that like it doesn't make sense why the boss is putting that indicator on the ground. Then I'm not necessarily asking for something like that, but still consistency across the board I think would be good.
Defined borders on everything, man. Defined borders on frontals, defined borders on swirlies. Come on. At least do that for me, Blizzard, please.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, as far as the 11.0.5 patch, I guess, and then some, that's really all I had to cover there.
Yeah.
The next main thing that I wanted to talk about is this Challenger's Peril affix change. Man, I saw this yesterday. Was it yesterday they posted about it?
Yesterday.
I don't know where it was. And I immediately just put like in our Discord, what the fuck is this? And then like I just
laughed. Laughed.
We talked about this before, where it's like there are ways to fix this. And I feel like they took what we had suggested and implemented it in the most like fucking bass-ackwards way possible. Like, oh, we're just going to give you 90 additional seconds at 7+ keys. Okay, so we have the ability to give you extra time based on your key level. Do we not have the ability to give you less time based on your key level? Can we not just like remove this affix or repurpose this affix from being 15 seconds off your death or off your timer when you die to being now the timer has 90 less seconds? Like, I feel like that would be so much better, and it would get relatively the same effect, but it would feel so much better than this 15 seconds every time somebody dies shit.
It's so funny. It's so funny to me that this is the way they went through it. So one of the things we had talked about, and again, I want to remind people, this was not like my original idea. I heard this somewhere else. But taking the concept of lives that are in delves and adding them to Mythic Plus. And so basically what I said was, well, maybe you could have like a certain amount of lives where it doesn't count against your timer until you've crossed that threshold. And this is essentially an ass backwards way of doing exactly that, right? You have an additional 90 seconds. The deaths still take 15 seconds off. So essentially, you have 6 free lives until your deaths start to affect the original timer of the key. That's hilarious. It's so funny. For like you could just imagine a lay player that's like not following the news, understanding what's going on, like just booting up the game and reading this affix and be like, all right, so at 7 you get this affix, and what this affix does is it adds 90 seconds to the timer. Huh, cool. But you also lose 15 seconds for deaths instead of 5. Why does it do both of those things? Why? And yeah, the answer is because it's a fucking Band-Aid. It's a Band-Aid on the problem. It's a Band-Aid on people who hated this affix. They didn't find it fun. They were blaming this affix for all of their problems with Mythic Plus. Some of it fair. And as we've talked about. And so they didn't want to just rip the affix out at mid-season. I part of me kind of understands that. Like, here's what I think right now. Season 2, this is going to be gone. They will come up with something else. I don't know what it's going to be. Maybe it'll be more timer change shenanigans. I don't know. But I fully expect in season 2 of the expansion, this affix will just be 100% gone. But then you ask yourselves, okay, well, how do I remove it mid-season then? Can I even do that? And the answer is kind of no, right? Like, this is a leaderboard system where people have timed keys already. What the fuck does it look like when you're comparing a key from some guy who timed a 13 in week 4 before this change went in to some guy who timed a 13 in week 8 after this change went in? It doesn't make sense. So this is just a Band-Aid. They can't remove the affix yet, so they're going to leave the affix, but they're just increasing times in all dungeons across the board to essentially counter the affix, which I guess it works technically. There was a key that we missed by a minute and 9 seconds the other day that I logged into the game today and said, congratulations, you timed that actually. Here's some points. So like, I think keys are going to be much easier now. Probably. Like, I think I still have a couple more 11s to time, maybe 3. That I need to get done this week and then start working on 12s. I think timing those 11s is going to be significantly easier. A perfect example of this is our Grim Batol that we ran on Sunday night. It was an 11 Grim Batol. It did not go well. It went very, very poorly, actually. We died 14 times. And one of which was because our friendly neighborhood Red Paladin accidentally bopped me. The other was my aforementioned sitting in the swirly that I couldn't see and getting mind controlled. And then we had some mess ups with some of the pulls on the second boss. Like, it was not a clean dungeon run. It's timed now. like we timed it, and that's the type of key where I really felt like we did not deserve to time it. Like, there was plenty of mistakes that were made during the course of that key that, yeah, we probably didn't deserve that. But now under this new rule, it's a timed key, and we would have timed it perfectly fine, and everything would have been great. So it's like, I guess this is a good thing ultimately, especially for people struggling at the 7 through 9 range. But yep. It's weird, man. It's really weird.
I really don't like it at all. I never liked this affix, and I really wish that they would just do what I said when I first started talking about this, in that at 7 and onward, they just reduce the timer, which I get they can't do that now, because that would mean they would remove timed keys rather than adding timed keys. So that's an issue. But this is still like, I don't like this solution. I hope that it goes away in season 2. I hope that it doesn't stay like this. I don't care if they end up doing what I'm saying, where they just reduce the timer at 7s. I don't care if they remove the affix entirely. I don't care if they rework the affix. I just don't want this affix in its current iteration to stay as a permanent thing in the game.
Yeah, and I think that's what you're going to get.
Cool. Well, we'll see.
So, okay,
I'm hopeful.
Before we move on from this, I just want to reiterate like what they said when they changed this, to like see if we actually think this affix accomplishes this goal at all. So what it says is, we wish for Challenger's Peril to emphasize precise play and place a greater risk on players' decisions as they progress through higher keystone levels. With this goal in mind, we wanted to give players a bit more breathing room for these decisions by adding a bonus to Challenger's Peril while maintaining the penalty aspect. So do you think the additional timer penalty accomplishes the goal of emphasizing precise play and placing a greater risk on players' decisions?
I personally do not. I feel like all this does is just it's a feels bad affix.
Mm-hmm.
Like if anything goes wrong, you are immediately feeling way worse than you did when you were losing 5 seconds. And like for example, I did a key today. It was a 10, and we had one person get like double targeted with something and then hit with an AoE all within like a second of each other. And they just died.
Mm-hmm.
And so like you lose 15 seconds because of that. And it feels bad to lose 15 seconds to that. Sure, yeah, we could have AoE stopped. Yes, we could have stunned. Yes, they probably could have layered more defensives. But like in that moment, right? Like it just feels like the game was unfair to you specifically because you out of 5 people were targeted with 3 things all at the same time.
Yeah.
But like that's the case where I don't feel like this is doing what it's intended to do, and instead it's just making the key feel worse.
Yeah, I think you're right. There is tech in the game where they can tell mobs to cycle through targets on stuff. Like if you've been targeted by something, you will not get targeted by the next one again to like make sure that that kind of stuff doesn't happen. It's not used consistently across the board. And I don't know if I know like you can do it within one mob itself. Like if it has a targeted spell, it will not target the same person twice in a row. But I don't know if you can do it where like multiple targets are hitting the same person or not. I don't know if that tech exists, but I think they should work on that because that does feel bad and feel unfair, especially if they're going to have something like this affix in the game that makes those deaths so punishing. And to get back on my high horse and to go off of something that I've heard some other content creators talk about in the past, the biggest problem with this affix is perhaps not the affix, but the graveyard situation in Mythic Plus, which once again needs to be addressed. Like I think I heard Growl talk about this the other day, that it was like, everyone talks about how great Dawnbreaker is time wise. It feels like a key where you have plenty of time. And I do think no small part of that is the fact that if you die in Dawnbreaker, you can be back to where you were within 5 to 10 seconds. It doesn't matter where you are in the dungeon. You die, you release, and you are back there in a matter of seconds, rather than like Stone Vault, which has this incredibly long run back. And so yeah, I mean I beat this drum again real quick just for a sec, is like the graveyard situation in Mythic Plus is atrocious and needs to be also looked at.
The graveyard situation in the game is atrocious, in my opinion. Like,
Yeah.
I I want there to be trash and raids. We've talked about this before. I like the aesthetic of knowing like this isn't just like a boss's room.
Yeah.
Like you are going through an actual place and
Mm-hmm.
then going to the boss.
Yep.
Once you make it to the boss, once the boss has been engaged, your graveyard should update to the boss's room.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
like
Why not?
like
What
that needs to happen.
and all the band-aids of like the last few raids, they put in these experiment tables that you can eat stuff that make you run really fast. It's like, that's cool. Just fucking put me where the boss is, and then you don't have to have a slime table that I can run fast when I eat the slime. Just put me where the boss is. Yeah, it's stupid. And the fact that like raids need a warlock just to soulstone someone, not for any kind of advantage in combat, but just to make the wipe recovery during progression easier. It's beyond stupid.
Mhm.
This is one of another instance perhaps where they're letting their aesthetic desires for the game kind of trump gameplay in a way that I don't think they should.
Yeah. And I think it's even worse in Mythic Plus. We've talked about it before,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Ultimately I think the same thing that I do for Raid that I do for Mythic Plus in kind of like a different way. Like I don't think that you need to update the graveyard when you engage the boss in Mythic Plus. I think the graveyard should be updated when you defeat the boss.
Yep.
Like you should at the very least always respawn at the previous boss.
Yep. 100%.
Like they have these ways to get back to where you were if you die in things like City of Threads or Arakara, but those are slow. And
Mhm.
like when we're talking about City of Threads, a dungeon that already has baked in like 45 seconds of RP of a guy walking upstairs, opening something, and then getting fucking put into ice. Like we are already wasting time. Why are we forcibly wasting more time if somebody dies? I don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what to tell you. It's all not good. So hopefully,
Well,
they'll hear the feedback on this. And I by the way, I do think sometimes this game, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on this. I think this game is like almost too open to feedback, like to the point, like the petition thing we were talking about last week, where people were like petitioning in fucking Group Finder about how they were, or protesting rather in Group Finder, how they were furious about the state of Mythic Plus and yada yada yada. It's like, I hope that none of that was taken seriously, and like because it's ridiculous. And I hope, like, at the end of the day, the developers and designers of this game need to make decisions that make sense for the game and not just always acquiesce to everything the player base is asking for, because sometimes we don't know what the fuck we're talking about. But there are some examples where I think they should listen, and this graveyard situation is definitely one of them.
you think you do, but you don't, Scott. You think you do, but you don't.
Man, I don't know. Still think he was kind of right. As someone who's played Classic, yeah, we don't really need that.
To move over into the kind of the next thing that I wanted to talk about is the kind of our current feelings of like what the state of the game is right now. And this is more so the state of the game like as a whole. So like starting off with Mythic Plus, we did an initial review of the dungeons and the Mythic Plus season. But I want to circle back. We've really been hampering on some of these affixes, some of the dungeons, the class and meta discussion. And I kind of want to get our feelings, both you and I, on how this is playing out now. There have been massive changes since we initially talked about this. There have been massive changes to like gear acquisition, right? Like you can get crests from an 8 instead of a 9 now. Like things like that fundamentally change how we feel about the season. And it's what brought like, Dragonflight season Dragonflight season 1 started off super rocky as well, but was remembered very fondly.
Yeah.
Like there were a lot of good dungeons there that people liked, and everybody hated a lot of them when we first got started. Like, I mean, everybody loves Algathar Academy is the best example. That every boss in that dungeon was so ungodly overtuned when we first started it, but they got it right, and now it's one of the best dungeons they ever released.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I want to take a look back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny if you like look back over their last 6 episodes we've had. You see a trend of, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for Mythic Plus. Oh my gosh, to yeah, this is okay. To oh no. And I'm here kind of on the other side of it now, and I'm here to say that I think this is a good season, and I'm having a lot of fun with it, actually. And I think it's funny. Like, I think this probably always happens to me in every season, where like it starts off like really excited and then a little rocky, and then I eventually get there. But the difference is I usually don't have a podcast that captures my feelings as I'm going through it and expose me as a hypocrite and an overreactor, which is, I think, what kind of happened in some ways here. I am pretty jazzed on Mythic Plus right now. Like, I think last week I had a pretty good week. I think it feels like I've started to get the gear. Like, my character is just about 629 now. And so, like, I feel like the 10s and 11s I'm doing have felt noticeably easier to me. I feel like people in our group are doing more damage because they've got better gear. So the DPS numbers are up. So the timer feels a little bit easier. And so it just feels like I've just gotten to the point where like I'm just kind of vibing right now. And like, obviously I've got a little bit more gearing to do. I've got a few more 11s to time. And then comes the actual push portion of the season when I'm actually going to start in 12s and see how those go and higher than that. I expect those are going to be difficult. We stepped into a 12 yesterday, and it did not go well. But that's fine. I expect those to be a ramp up and challenge, and it's going to be a learning experience for me and for everyone else. And so, like, I didn't expect to waltz into a 12 for the first time and time it. Definitely feels harder. So yeah, I mean, like, everything is kind of clicking for me right now, where I'm really enjoying things. The affixes, I have my quibbles, and we've talked about those throughout the last few weeks, but overall, I think they're a much, much, much better system than the previous affix system. And my class is fun. I'm enjoying tanking. Like, so yeah, I know I'm feeling pretty good about Mythic Plus right now. How about you?
I completely agree. So I don't know if a lot of the struggle that I was having at the beginning of Mythic Plus was due to kind of like the fact that I felt like a lot of it was overtuned. The affixes were kind of weird, or ultimately the fact that I'm playing, I think probably one of the worst like dungeon performing specs that I think I have personally played in a while. I was playing Warlock pretty much exclusively up until relatively recently. And Warlock's not like in an awful spot right now, but they are like middle of the pack, bottom middle of the pack. And typically when I'm DPSing keys, I'm playing one of the top like DPS for AoE because I've always played something more for Mythic Plus than I have for Raid. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where a lot of my struggle came from is like this time I made a conscious decision to play a character for Raid and bring all of the Warlock utility to Raid, and that made Mythic Plus feel a little worse for me. On top of the fact that while I have played Warlock in the past, I'm not as comfortable on it. And so I think that that's been really my main hangups. I think that ultimately all of the changes that they have done though this season have been positive. I know that I'm clowning on them for this like 7 affix change, but ultimately I do think that it's better this way. I do think that this is going to solve some of the issues that we've had. And I do have one thing that I want to say as far as the change that they made to the, I forget what it's called. It's one of the Zalatas bargain ones. It's the one where you have to kill the ad.
Mm-hmm.
They tell us about the buff to this, and then they make it the last in the damn rotation. And I'll be damned. I'm pissed off about it. I just want to play with the 20% verse. Come on, Blizzard. You're going to make me wait another week. What the fuck?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think these affixes are not perfect and probably could use some iterating on. As they've continued to do. And like actually one thing I want to see with the affixes, I think we talked about how maybe this would be the case going into the season. I would like there to be like a constant rotation of new affixes coming in. I don't know if season to season, like I think it depends. Like obviously these are all Zalateth themed affixes, and so they fit with what this expansion is doing right now. I don't know what season 2 of the expansion is going to look like, what that raid's going to be. I've heard some rumors, but like if it's Zalateth focused, it might make sense to have Zalateth affixes in season 2, but it might make sense to do something completely different. And I actually think it would be cool if, you know, we talked about the death of the seasonal and how we wished seasonals were still a thing because they give a season an identity and a flavor. If we made these rotating like pool of 4 affixes seasonals, essentially a no form of seasonals, I think that would ultimately be really cool. And it forces them to kind of always be thinking and designing and coming up with new ideas. It allows for the affix system to not get stale, which was, I think, one of the problems with the affix system before, was that you had some in there that had just been in the game for like years. Like Sanguine was in the game for how long? Like 5-6 years. And that eventually gets frustrating. And it's no surprising that some of the oldest affixes are some of the ones that people hated the most because they just were tired of them. And so I think that's a really cool solution to kind of bring flavor and seasonal identity to the seasons outside of just what the dungeon pool is going to be. So I really hope they consider doing that. It might end up being just like an expansion wide thing rather than a season wide thing, and I'd be a little disappointed in that. But I think they have a real opportunity here. I hope they take advantage of it. I hope they have time to take advantage of it. Because I mean, I will acknowledge that one thing we're doing, if we're rotating affixes every season on top of dungeons, that's a whole mess of testing that has to be done. That's a whole mess of tuning that's going to be probably improperly tuned at the start of the season and be frustrating, just like it was this season. And so like that's harder. But I think they should go for the hard stuff.
Yeah. Is there, so to kind of ask about dungeons, is there any dungeon that a couple months ago, you were like, "This dungeon fucking sucks. I don't ever want to run this. Every time I see this dungeon, it makes me pissed off." And now is just like, it's not that bad.
Um, I still don't love Necrotic Wake. I think Necrotic Wake doesn't feel as bad to me. I think the changes there have been better. We timed an 11 this week, and I was rather proud of myself for getting through that key. Because I hadn't even, I got so much score from that key because I hadn't even timed it on a 10. We got an 11. I was like, well, let's just give it a shot. And we timed it pretty handedly too. Like we did a really good job on that key. Um, and so I think I'm cooled on that one a little bit. Still not my favorite. Actually, like to answer, like to the opposite of what your question is, I really don't like mists at all anymore. I'm so kind of tired of that key. Like I was just kind of thinking of like which is my least favorite dungeon in the season now. And I'm not sure if it's mists, but like I don't know. There's just like stuff in that dungeon that really bothers me, especially that last boss. I really don't like the last boss in that key, especially when it's super high difficulty.
The last area in general, I feel like, is just like wild
Yeah.
in Mists right now.
I hate
Yeah,
how like it's definitely better time. Like it's a time save to skip that first pack when you jump down after the second boss, but you can't always easily skip it. I don't like when that's the case. Like that
yeah,
pack sucks. It's so time inefficient, but skipping it is sometimes harder than you want it to be.
yeah. So, uh, my dungeon that I thought I was gonna hate, like absolutely hate, that I don't really think is all that bad, is Siege. And I think when we were doing our initial review of this, I don't remember if I was off on Siege or not yet then. But I was very worried about this dungeon when I heard it was coming back. I absolutely detested this place when it was in the game in BFA, and it's actually become one of my more, I guess, looked forward to dungeons.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of things in there that are bullshit. I think the thing that comes to mind to me is like the absolute most bullshit part of that entire dungeon is um it's after you fight the lady who jumps up on the ship and you go through the entire like giant area with the monkeys. You go up these stairs and there's a spotter with a bunch of gunners. And like that pole specifically has just one shot people in my group
Yeah.
over and over and over and over again. And like that poll, I feel like needs to be looked at. It just doesn't feel fair. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of clarity on who's targeting who. Obviously, if you have Plater, you can get by that. You can tell it's targeting you. That's how I tend to live through that poll because I can see if I'm getting targeted by three different things, I should probably press something. But yeah, that poll needs looked at in the final boss. Outside of that, though, I feel like this is one of my easier dungeons.
Yeah, I don't mind this dungeon too much anymore. I still think the stupid frontal overlap on the third boss that eventually happens is really frustrating, and I still don't know how to best deal with it. Like the problem is it always changes based on which direction the waves are coming from. So sometimes it's very, very easy for me to deal with, and sometimes it's very difficult for me to deal with, and that's kind of a roll of the dice. But that seems like something I'm probably just going to get better at with time. So like that's not something that I think needs changing in the dungeon. I think the trash definitely hurts, but it hurts in a way that feels fair to me. And yeah, I mean the last boss is like I feel bad for healers. It's like I guess my thing with the last boss is not even like the challenge of it. It just doesn't. It's not fun. Like it's just not a fun fight to do. Like
Yeah.
it's just like you're just standing there hitting on one tentacle, and then you run to the other tentacle, and then one person gets to fire a cannon while everyone else moves on. Like the most fun part of the fight for me is the transitioning between the three platforms because that's kind of fun. Like running along the wood planks is kind of except when you get stuck under one and get but it's ultimately just like the biggest complaint is it's just not very very fun. And
Yeah.
I am surprised because yeah, I mean if you listen back to like our first episode when we talked about that dungeon, we fucking hated that place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can't think of a key that I like that I now hate. I still pretty much really like Mists. Um, I hate the second boss with everything in my fucking being. Like that boss is so fucking annoying. The shit leading up to it is so fucking annoying. It's annoying that you can pull the dungeon the exact same way every single time and still come out of it with different count before you get to the final boss.
Yeah.
But outside of that, like, I don't really dislike this dungeon. I think the final boss is a lot easier for a DPS than it is a tank, because you're not having to worry about grouping things. You're not having to worry about mind link on you at all times, because as a DPS, you get it off yourself and you're good. As a tank, you're connected to 4 other people. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I read a strategy with this boss that everyone stacks on top of each other basically at all times. And then when the poison swirlies move out, you all just move the same direction. And then when the mind link moves out, you assign like tank moves left, everyone else moves right, and then you immediately stack up again. And that's just how you control the boss. You control the poison. I think we need to try that because maybe I'll like the boss better when that kind of stuff is more controlled. Because it just seems like the boss is just chaos incarnate. And there's times when like I'm desperately trying to break the mind links on people and they're just running diagonal to me instead of straight away and dying, and I'm like, it's really frustrating. So
So we don't have to spend a lot of time on this. I guess it doesn't have to be a yes or a no answer, but we talked about a lot of the bad stuff that came in with the anniversary patch. Do you ultimately think that this anniversary patch is achieving what they wanted? Like the anniversary part of the anniversary patch?
I guess I'm really kind of shocked at how uninterested in it I am. Like I logged on Tuesday. I did the world bosses. I did the weekly for the 5 time walking dungeons. I did that. I still haven't done like the Gates of Anchorage event thing. I just haven't done it. We still haven't done the raid. We will be doing the raid though. I think probably this week. And so we might come back next week talking about how much we liked or didn't like that raid. But I mean, it's harmless to me. It's fine. There's just like I don't want to like make it the game's problem that I'm uninterested in doing all these things that they came up with. Like that's not the game's problem. There's plenty of people that are, but it's just like the way I like to participate with this game and the things that are offered there, they just don't really interest me that much. Like the time walking dungeons was fine. It was like, oh, it's neat to be back here, but like I don't like part of me thinks, and let me know if you think this is true or not. Part of me thinks the existence of classic hurts what they're trying to do with some of this stuff. Like if classic, like just imagine a world in which classic never came out and then they announced classic time walking. Like I think people would be like way more excited about that. Oh, I get to go back to the dead mines, which by the way, someone corrected us from last week and said that the dead mines that is in the time walking dungeons is actually like the OG dead mines. You fight Van Cleef, you don't fight Vanessa. So it is like
Oh shit, I didn't even know that.
The original dead mines. But like think of how much more exciting that would be as a player if classic didn't exist. But classic does exist and it's existed for some time. So like the people that like would get like really excited about classic time walking are probably people that have already dabbled in classic WoW already.
Sure.
So I think that hurts a little bit. I mean, there's like lots of fun things that I've seen. Like the mount thing is supposed to be really fun. Like there's lots of fun stuff that I think people are really enjoying that I just really have no interest in partaking in at all. So I mean, I don't know. We'll see. Like if the Blackrock Depths raid is like really really fun, I'll come back next week and be like, no, this was a great patch, great idea, I love it. But that's really the only part of it that ever interested me. So I'm here a week later. I wasn't really into farming the bronze for the tier sets, and I'm glad I didn't spend a lot of time because they massively buffed it today. So I'm glad I didn't spend a lot of time doing that, only to find those things buffed. So I guess I'll just like kind of, they made it now so like by like casually playing the game, you're probably going to get enough to at least buy a few of the sets. So probably just going to do that.
Yeah.
And that's about it for me. I don't know. What do you think?
So I don't know, you might call me a nerd for this, but I have actually the last couple days been finding myself hanging out in the like celebration area just to hear all the NPCs like shout things while I'm like queuing for keys or something like that. So
No,
rather
that's
than
really
just
cool.
sitting in Dornagal, I've just been sitting in the celebration area. So
That's really
I don't
cool.
know.
That's a fun idea.
It's
might try
doing it
that.
for me. But just hearing the dude from Karazhan, the announcer guy, like do his whole spiel when Lore Walker Cho's about to tell a story, and the like, well, come if you're able to hear Lore Walker Cho tell a fable. Like, I don't know. It's just like I love sitting there listening to them all scream things every now and again.
No, that's really cool.
uh, so I do think that there's positive parts of this patch. So I just wanted to make sure that we kind of like hit on that. There are a lot of good things that came. There's obviously a lot of bugs. There's a lot of things in the competitive scene that are being abused and a lot of things like that, which is, you know, more or less the area of the game that Scott and I like to focus on.
Yeah.
So it does seem like we drown it out a little bit sometimes, but I do want to at least give credit where credit's due. I think that this is hitting a lot of the nostalgia, but I do think you're right. I think that in a world where Classic doesn't exist, this brings back a lot more nostalgia than we have, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And like, I don't know. It's cool. I'm glad they did something. I'm glad they're celebrating. Everyone buy the $90 amount to celebrate the 20th birthday. I think they've got more stuff coming too, right? Like it's also the 30th anniversary of Warcraft in general, and they've got some like live stream thing they're going to be doing pretty soon, that there's going to be some announcements in there. I'm not sure, like there's been a lot of speculating on what the announcements are going to be. Some stuff rumored to be related to like Warcraft 3. There's some Hearthstone stuff, some Warcraft Rumble stuff. Yay. So there might be more coming to like more celebrate the 30th anniversary of Warcraft as a whole. I don't know. I don't need there to be. I just think it's cool. And yeah, I'm really kind of excited to do this raid next week. So that's about all I feel. Yeah. Hey, this game is really good. I like this game a whole lot. It's a good game.
So we have one more thing here that we will touch on real quick. Scott, I'll kind of let you take the lead on this one, but there has been a movie recently that came out around World of Warcraft and the impact that it has on people's lives.
Yeah. So, people that only listen to this podcast and don't know me from anything else probably don't know that I have several other podcasts, including one that talks about movies, because I'm a white man that's middle-aged, so I have to have a movie podcast. It's in the bylaws. And so I really like movies. I like probably almost even more so than video games or World of Warcraft. I'm a movie guy. And so I spend a lot of time reading about movies, writing about movies, thinking about movies. And Sundance this year, which is an independent film festival, there was a film that premiered there, a documentary film called The Incredible Life of Ibelin. And it caught my eye because The Remarkable Life of Ibelin, sorry, that people were talking about it and said, this is a movie about World of Warcraft, sort of, kind of. It's a movie about a young man who had a degenerative muscular disease who spent a lot of time in World of Warcraft. And after he passed away, his parents like found out that he had essentially this whole life in this game with people. And I just wanted to bring it up here to tell people you should probably go check it out. It's on Netflix right now. It's very good. It's very beautiful and touching. And it just it kind of puts things in perspective for me sometimes, because we play this game and we like this game. And we like this game for a lot of very specific reasons, right? We engage on this game as a challenge, as a thing to get better at and progress at, and also to hang out with friends. I think is an important part of it for all of us. But there are people that that is the primary part of the game, right? And this Ibelin character, that's the name of his character in the game. The kid's name was Mats. I think he lived in one of the Finland. They're going to be so mad at me. Norway. He lived in Norway. And he was in a role-playing guild, and he spent most of his time in this game just role-playing this character named Ibelin. And he got to be the type of person he wanted to be, and he also got to be a type of person who wasn't stuck in a wheelchair and wasn't suffering from this degenerative condition that would eventually kill him. And got to have relationships. One of the, I think the most beautiful parts is listening to his parents talk about one of the roughest parts about your son being diagnosed with this disease is like realizing, he's never going to have relationships in the way you wanted him. He's probably never going to fall in love in the way you wanted him. He's probably never going to, matter in people's lives like you dream for your children to have. And the absolute joy that they had in realizing that he had this whole online community where he experienced love and friendship and mattered to people. Like this guy was apparently incredibly kind in the game and would seek people out that are having a hard time in their real life and talk to them and help them and coach them through it. And it's just incredibly beautiful story. And it, like, the way they film it. So apparently this role-playing guild like logs everything that the characters do. So they're just like, and then they post those logs on their forums. So there's just like thousands and thousands of pages of interactions. And so what they've done for the documentary is they took some of these interactions that happened in the game, and then they in the game recreated them, like animated them in World of Warcraft. These conversations and full with emotes, some of them just emotes that exist in the game, and some of them they clearly just custom animated stuff. It's just really, really, really cool. And again, like, just reminds you of like how incredible these games and these worlds are, and they can be for people, that like it just an outlet and escape. And a lot of people play them this way. Like a lot of people look to these games as an escape. A lot of people, I've never been a role player myself, but I think that's a totally valid way to engage with this world and this game. And I just think it's really cool. And sometimes we get so caught up in like the numbers and the tuning and like the score and the raid and all these parts of this thing that we don't like step back and see this as this incredible place where people can meet each other and have relationships with each other in ways that they couldn't ever possibly have those outside of the game. And I just think that's really cool. And I'm glad that people made this movie, and I'm glad that we got to see this story. It's of course very, very sad because like it's not spoilers. The young man unfortunately passed away. I think this was back in 2014 or something like that. But has continued to have an effect and will continue to have an effect on people. And I just think that's really, really cool. So yeah, it's available on Netflix right now. Definitely worth a watch for sure.
Also, if you didn't know, actually where his guild had a funeral for him in the game,
mm-hmm.
and where they had the funeral, there's actually a gravestone as well in the game now.
Yeah, and it is a kind of recreation of what his gravestone looks like in real life. It's really cool. And they had to turn mounting off there today because, wouldn't you believe it, but people in this game are assholes, and they were just going there and putting big, huge mounts on it to block it for people that just watched the documentary and wanted to go there to pay some respects. So they've had to turn that off because that's what people do in this game. It's a wonderful world filled with incredible people that are kind and wonderful, and also giant assholes.
Well, for what it's worth, I think that the main thing that I would say to kind of take away from this too, from my perspective, since I haven't watched it yet, is it was a wake up call to me, because Scott and I were talking about this before the show, and like I hadn't really watched it, so I went and I looked at like I knew the premise, but I went and I actually looked at some of the trailers and some of what other people had thought about it, and it really just gave me this like eye-opening reminder to like check on your friends, see how they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Not only like your real life friends, but your online friends,
Yeah.
Just check on people, make sure you stay in touch, and really reconnect with everybody.
Yeah, definitely.
But
all right,
I think as far as main segments go, I don't really think there's much else to add for today. I kind of put this out on a wing because I didn't really know if we were going to have a lot to discuss as far as like the bugs and everything were concerned. So I am glad we got through everything. But next week, what I really want to talk about, and I really hope that we get to do it, is the BlackRock raid. I think we're a couple weeks behind on that. So I think that that's going to be kind of like one of our main focuses for next week. So if you want to talk or hear about the BlackRock raid, definitely tune in next week because I want to spend some time chatting about that.
Yeah, one of our guildies just had to go and get married last weekend, which pulled a bunch of our guild out. So thanks, Ben. And congratulations, buddy. Congratulations.
Either way, though, we will be attempting to raid this on Monday, so we will have pretty fresh ideas about it.
Yeah.
On the Tuesday podcast. So I agree with Scott. What an asshole! Who gets married on a weeknight or a weekend? Sorry, where we have to raid.
Yeah.
That isn't every weekend or anything like that. So, but yeah. So as far as the podcast goes today, nothing really else to add there. What I do want to ask though, is Scott and I kind of threw out suggestions for this 15-second death affix, the Challenger's Peril affix. I want to know, do you agree with us? Do you have a different idea? What would be a better solution? Would you like to see it removed? Do you want to see it get reworked? I think it's on some level, we're going to have something at the level 7 affix. So I kind of want to get your guys' thoughts on that and see where we can go there. But as always, you can contact us over at yellingintothevoidwow@gmail.com. YouTube is at yellingintothevoidwow, and Twitter is at intothevoidwow.
And if you're not already subscribed, please make sure you do so. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and pretty much anywhere else in the world podcasts are, which is everywhere. We're everywhere. Just come find us and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode.
Also, please consider liking, subscribing, commenting on the YouTube videos. All of these help us get more exposure, introduce us to more people, allow us to continue to make the content we make here. And as far as YouTube goes, you should go check out last week's thumbnail because it's a pretty uncanny picture of what Scott and I are going to look like when we're old.
I don't like it. I don't like it.
But all right, guys. Well, until next week, we'll just be over here yelling into the void.